It's the country with the largest proven oil reserves, and oil is the economic lifeline for Venezuela. Now, the U.S. has announced billions of dollars of sanctions against the state-owned oil company PDVSA, saying President Nicolas Maduro and his allies can no longer loot the assets of the Venezuelan people.
PDVSA has long been a vehicle for embezzlement, for corruption, for Venezuelan officials and businessmen. Today's designation of PDVSA will help prevent further diversion of Venezuela's assets by Maduro and will preserve these assets for the people of Venezuela where they belong.
The U.S. sanctions come less than a week after opposition leader Juan Guaido declared himself president at a demonstration attended by tens of thousands of Venezuelans. Since then, the dispute over who should lead Venezuela has turned into a geopolitical battle on the world stage. So far, more than 30 countries have pledged support of Juan Guaido, including the US, Europe, and most of Latin America. And more than a dozen, including China, Russia, Cuba, and Turkey, continue to back Nicolas Maduro. Maduro was re-elected as president of Venezuela in May in elections much of the international community called fraudulent. Maduro accuses the United States of promoting a coup against him. He says with the continued support of Russia and China, he will remain president of Venezuela.
I hold the US president responsible for any violence in Venezuela. It will be you, Mr. President Donald Trump, responsible for that policy, trying to change the administration in Venezuela and for the blood that could spread. That blood will be on your hands, President Donald Trump. You are responsible even when you don't show your face.
Guaido has said he's not going to participate in what he calls false dialogue with Maduro. And the White House has warned Maduro any intimidation of Guaido or of American diplomats in Venezuela would trigger a response from the U.S. As the U.S. imposes a fresh new round of sanctions, Guaido has called on his supporters to take to the streets this week. He's urging members of the military to drop their support for Nicolas Maduro.
The armed forces should be with their families. They don't have enough food. They don't have enough basic necessities. They, like the rest of the Venezuelan population, are living on $3 a month. What we are asking the military to do is simply put themselves on the side of the Constitution and don't fire at peaceful protesters and young people who are fighting for their families' liberty.
Pressure is mounting from inside and outside the country for Maduro to step down. Maduro remains defiant. Juan Carlos Lamas, TRT World, Caracas.
Well, let's get more on the Venezuela crisis with TRT World's editor-at-large Craig Copetas, who joins us now from Paris. Hi, Craig. These latest sanctions are clearly designed to starve President Nicolas Maduro of his largest source of revenue, that is oil. And that's obviously in the hopes of forcing him to step down. Do you think it'll work?
Right now, doubtful. The consequences of what is going on between Trump and Maduro are absolutely sweeping. You know, PDVSA provides 95% of Venezuela's cash. So much so that the IMF today came out and stated that Venezuela is going to experience, wait for this, Oscar, 10 million% inflation this year. And we have this whole mess being exacerbated by U.S. National Security Advisor John Bolton walking into a room showing a legal pad on which was written 5,000 troops to Colombia. Well, let me tell you, if Donald Trump intends to go in there, 5,000 troops is nothing. It's not even enough to take command and control of Venezuela's Orinoco oil belt. You know, you got to wonder about these guys, because if Bolton's brains were leather, he couldn't saddle a flea. But the way these hardliners think in Washington now is giddy up and damn the consequences.
Incredible. These sanctions, as we know, are just the latest in a long line of measures that have been imposed against Venezuela to basically change the regime. But in the process, it's made life worse for ordinary Venezuelans. Who's to blame for this economic situation in the country? Is it Maduro or the US?
Well, the U.S. plays a role, but this is Maduro's responsibility primarily. Look, it's always easy to blame the United States of America. But in this instance, every Latin American leader, with the exception of the leader of Bolivia, is behind the move to have Maduro step down. But he still has some very powerful allies. Principal among them, the Russians. Maduro is Putin's man in Caracas. And what a lot of analysts have told me today is they're worried if this at some point could lead to a Venezuelan, in quote, missile crisis, a la the Cuban Missile Crisis, because the Russians are going in there. The Russians have assets there. The Russians want naval bases there, as do the Chinese. It's a global tinderbox right now, Oscar.
And a large part of the Venezuelan opposition support base seems to be foreign right-wing governments. Do you get the sense that the majority of ordinary Venezuelans are behind the movement?
Well, from what I'm hearing out of Miami, where a lot of them are, and also from Caracas, is that the only Venezuelans currently behind Maduro are the generals, because he takes care of the military. So would this new leader, Guaido, is he going to go ultra right wing? I don't think that script's been written yet. The bottom line is the Venezuelan people are suffering. The U.S. has cut off their cash, and a tinderbox is growing down there, and they're going to be facing, as I said, 10 million% inflation. I don't even think it was that bad in Zimbabwe.
No, incredible, isn't it? Craig Copetas in Paris, thank you as always.